Here we go then, the first batch are here. When you're doing a youth development save, it's like Christmas morning when the first intake arrive. And today, we're going to check them out. But before we delve into that new crop of young talents, let's start with a little bit of news closer to home first of all. We've been offered a new contract and we've duly signed it as well. It's the 30th of April 2023 and we've got a contract that's going to take us all the way to the end of next season because the board were pleased with how we've been performing this. There is also more news behind the scenes. In our last episode, we told you how we'd graduated as a National C licence coach. Well, we did go into the boardroom and they agreed to fund the B licence. So that course is underway. So hopefully we're going to be a little bit more used to the club on the training ground pretty soon. However, on the field, I'm afraid to report things continue to go from bad to worse. This is an absolute disaster of epic proportions. But we now find ourselves 7 points clear at the top of the table. We've only got 5 games left to play. That's just 15 points left to compete for. There is a chance, I suppose, that we might get lucky and implode and only come second, thus qualifying for a playoff with a team from the division above, rather than going up automatically, but I don't see us dropping out of the playoff places altogether. We're 11 points clear of Triglav in third. I don't think there's enough games for them to catch us, which leaves us in an absolutely perilous situation because next season we're going to be losing some of our players. We're going to have the weakest of squads, and we might be faced with the prospect of trying to compete with clubs from the division above. But before we introduce you to that first youth intake, one final bit of news, and that's to do with how you can continue to support the channel if you wish. Obviously, we are eternally grateful to all of the channel patrons who pledge to support me on a monthly basis, but we know that this is a tough financial climate and times are tight. So we've also set up something called YouTube channel memberships. Now, YouTube channel memberships are a fairly recent phenomenon, and in order to become a channel member, you just need to visit any of the tabs along the channel homepage and click on the join button. Now, YouTube channel members will get to enjoy a couple of rather tantalizing little perks, such as badges that are earned depending on the length of time that you're a channel member, as well as some rather cute emojis that you can use down in the comments section. But I'm very conscious of the financial pressures that many people might be under, and whilst they like the idea of supporting me, their own finances may not accommodate it. So I've tried to make YouTube channel memberships the most affordable way that you can pledge your support should you wish. We've set the price of channel memberships on YouTube at just 99 pence or the equivalent in your local currency. So hopefully by introducing channel memberships, it will allow further people to show their support only if they wish, but at a price that's far more affordable. And so to those youth players, and if you remember from the last episode, we were promised 2 A-grade players, a striker and a defensive midfielder, as well as a C-grade goalkeeper. Well, first bit of news, I'm not sure we got the C-grade goalkeeper, because you have to scroll all the way down to the bottom to the players described as just meagre decent talents to find Žiga Masaric, who is unfortunately unambitious, although he's only 15 years old, so we've got a little bit of time to try and turn that around. He's a bit injury prone, and considering that he would be our second goalkeeper at the club, that's a little bit of a worry, but there are a couple of positives. The only other downside is that he's competitive and one-footed, and as a goalkeeper rather than a sweeper keeper, I don't mind that too much, but he's also got great shot stopping and he's also a consistent performer. So those two things are actually quite alluring about him. So you never know, Žiga might be a decent backup keeper yet. And if we have a look at the other decent talents, although the coaches might not think their prospects are great, there's one other down there that's been a bit of a surprise package and I think could be useful. And that is Matej Šalamun, who is a centre-half and a left-footed one as well. That's always a perk, as is being 6'5" tall at the age of 16. And believe me, I've taken over the under-19s and played a couple of friendlies. He is an aerial presence in both boxes. As for the downsides, well, he can't pass a ball. That's not ideal. and he's also fairly slow, so we've already put him on some personal training to try and improve his quickness, but there are some positives as well. He's got a fairly professional personality. That's the best of any of the players that came through. Obviously, he's got a good jumping reach and is good in the air for a 6'5" centre-half, and he's another player that's fairly consistent. So he might be useful to us as well. Elsewhere amongst these decent talents, well, I'm not sure there's too much, to be honest. But amongst the good talents, again, I was a little surprised. There might be a player or two that we might be able to use. A really quick winger is young Krisha Runtree, who again is unambitious. So we've got him as part of a mentoring group to try and iron that out. And apparently he's not the most intelligent, or he's not the most consistent at the moment. And we've got some work to do on his strength as well. But there are some other decent aspects to his play for a winger, including some blistering pace in the 2 friendlies that we've played. And at 16 years old and with a birthday in November, he could be in the first team squad this calendar year. So that is incredibly valuable to us as well. There is another player from the good talents that I'm actually quite excited about, and his name is The Rock Oblak, who I think could be one of the better players. First of all, this guy's birthday is right at the end of August, so virtually from the start of the season, we can get him involved. Now, let's start with the negatives. He doesn't really have great dribbling, and he's also a little bit over-competitive, and his strength and natural fitness are suspect. So there are problems. But as a deep-lying playmaker, see what you think of this. We've already got him going on the player trait of trying killer balls, and the coaches thought that that was a suitable suggestion. So I'm guessing that the vision and the passing are not too terrible. And he's also got a couple of other rather nice little aspects to his play, such as being a player of great technical ability. Now that is not something you always find in the youth players that I tend to generate. So as a little schemer in the centre of the park, The Rock might be quite decent. He's also got a reasonable personality as fairly ambitious, and as a defensive central midfielder, he's got good positioning and decision making, and is described as fairly intelligent. So I was pretty pleased with The Rock when he came through. Going a little bit further up this list, I think we've got 3 players that could definitely all make first team appearances. Described as a top talent is the striker Alan Kotnik. We've got a spirited personality, which is not too bad. Again, he's another one that lacks a bit of game intelligence. Now let me know down in the comments what attributes are going to be weak in your opinion if he doesn't have game intelligence. Is that going to be decision making, or is it going to be other aspects of his play? Let me know down in the comments where he's exactly going to be weak. But let's focus on the positives. As well as that rather decent personality, we've got another player that's going to be fairly consistent. He's 6 foot tall and left-footed and good in the air, but he's another decent technical player who he says has got a reasonable first touch. And as I'm currently playing a deep lying forward as the lone striker in our system, a first touch might not be the worst thing to possess. But to those top talents, and there is another really good striker in our ranks who might just get the nod ahead of Alan Kotnik, and that is Denis Valencic. This player really is quite a prospect. This time we've got an ambitious personality. I'm not sure how ambition relates to professionalism, because it's professionalism that I'm really searching for in these youngsters, but there's a lot to like about Dirty Den. He's 6'3" for starters, so he's going to be a physical presence up front. He can play as a wide man, but he can't cross, and he's another player that doesn't have this game intelligence, so I'm eager to try and work out what gaps that means there are in his game, and he also lacks a little bit of consistency, and as a striker, that's a trait that I'm not very keen on. But again, there are positives. He's 6'3", but likes a bit of a dribble. So if you imagine he grows to 6'4" by the time he's 18 years old and he's running towards you, That could be an asset. He's also got good balance, which means that he's a fairly skillful player. So I'm thinking he could be a threat running at opposition defences, and he could also improve a lot in the future, and hopefully that ambitious personality might go some way to helping him realise that potential. So Dirty Den is another player that we're looking to try and get into the side. And by the way, he's another player with an early-ish birthday. So by the end of October, he will be 17 and will be eligible to play for us. But the jewel in the crown of this particular intake is meant to be Matija Kavcic, and I think he could be decent as well. We've got a February birthday for a 16-year-old, so by the time we're coming out of the winter break, Matija might be ready for some first-team football. You'll notice that there aren't too many weaknesses to his game. He's not the quickest, so we've made that the focus of his individual training. And then it also points out that his personality of being a mercenary, clearly he was a big fan of the channel during FM23, so that mercenary personality is not ideal, but it just means that he always tries to look after himself and perhaps doesn't show the greatest of loyalty. Maybe in terms of professionalism, he might still be okay. Certainly he's performing well in training currently, but for a defensive or a central midfielder who could also fill in at centre-half, although he's going to have to grow a bit from 5'9", there are some aspects that look encouraging. I love players that are brave, and he doesn't just have a mid-green bravery, it is glowing. So that looks pretty useful. He's also got some other aspects that I think are good for a player that's going to be playing in central midfielder, such as that commitment. So I'm guessing that's going to be things like his teamwork potentially, maybe even his work rate might be quite good. And he's also fairly consistent, always a dream when you get it in a youth player, and he can improve a lot in the future. So theoretically, he's got a decent bit of potential. So there are our youth prospects. Some of them could be on the scene as early as the start of next season, but we've got to worry about the rest of this. So here is that disastrous run of form that we've been on, and I'm afraid it just stretches back and back and back. In fact, if you take out the defeat in the cup when we fielded our reserves against our parent club Domjala, honestly, we were not bribed to do that. I was doing it to rest the players. You've got to go back all the way to the 4th of September for the last time we tasted defeat in the league. So we've been on a really strong run. The players have started to get a little bit jittery now that the press have been branding us potential champions in waiting. They've thrown in 3 draws in the last 4 games, but since we played Triglav, we've had 6 matches and we've won 3 of them, starting with a home game against Fushina. This was our 2nd game back since the winter break, and a goal from Šípek gave us the points. Next up, it was another home game, and we took on Kirka, and we were pretty convincing. We won this one 2-0, Kaznic getting the first goal. In the next game, we dominated, and Grigorin had an effort ruled out, but you can see we had to leave it very late before Clement Kunstel curled home an equaliser. And we made it back-to-back draws in our next game as we drew 2-2 with Aluminium, with Levesque scoring a header before we found ourselves 2-1 down and we had to rely on Gajic to get an equaliser. The next game also looked like it might be heading towards a draw before Grigorin was able to just prod home a winner. And our most recent game was another rescue job as we found ourselves behind twice, relying on goals from first Gajic and then in the 78th minute Šípek. Are they going to win the game today, or are they going to heed my message and start the disastrous run that might just mean that we don't have to go up next season? Let's show you who we're going to be up against in a scout report. Today we have an away trip to Belia, who are scrapping for their lives and are just 3 points ahead of the drop zone. They've won just 3 games since September, although they did beat Primora 2-0 in their last outing. Their star man is striker Thomas Brigante, who scored 6 times this season and is wanted by some of the nation's biggest clubs. But coach Frank Chifa will be hoping to keep hold of his star man, as well as getting a win today as Belia take on NK Dob. So the pre-match team talk alluded to the fact that if we're victorious today, our playoff place could be confirmed. Let's see how they get on against a side who are towards the bottom of the table, and we often find it pretty difficult to break those kind of teams down So we'll have to see how we perform today. Kunstel's back. He was missing for our last game in our last episode. He's such an important player, even at the age of 41. We'll see whether he helps the boys win today. Early on, we've got to throw into our opponents. Suso is working his magic over on the left wing. Slavic is getting the ball over on the right, and they've sent it in. And there is the danger man, Briganti. I thought he might have been offside. There's no flag coming. The boys do have the jitters, don't they? We can't get the ball clear. Slavic then moves the ball over to the right-hand side, sends in a deep cross. And that is why this player is wanted by some of the country's top clubs. We've definitely been on top. They've scored with their only effort of the game. We've had 4 shots. 2 of them have been on target. But we are still behind. We've won possession of the ball. And we've given it to Kasnic, who turns, gives it to Keglar, and he set up Gajic, and he's through. And he should have equalised. Instead, he's tried to place it just to the side of the keeper, who sticks a foot out and keeps the score at 1-0 to our opponents. Gajic now curls an outward effort to the far post. Can't get anywhere near it. Feels like we're pressing for an equaliser. 6 shots, 3 on target, an XG of almost 1. But as we head into half-time, I think we're finding ourselves a goal down, and I think a little bit of a rollicking is coming. At the half-time break, I think I'm going to make a couple of changes because we've got some poor performances from our front 3, so I'm going to change their roles. Rather than wingers, we're going to go with an inside forward on the left. Gajic is going to move over from the right, and we're going to take off Gregorian because he's not playing well and has got anxious body language. So we're going to bring on the left-footed Zenkovic to try and cut in, leaving Levec to move to be the striker. Hopefully he can get a goal for us because he's the only one that looks like he's playing well. Kasnic is another player to keep an eye on. He's on a 6.5. We could always bring on Krupic to play in his place. Let's see whether these changes allow us to get back into the game as we kick off the second half. We're not having very many highlights, and I think fairly soon I might need to nudge our lines up in order to try and make us more attacking. Before we do that, Gajic has been fed by Levec, and Levec made a run forward, but Gajic missed him, unfortunately. He's got the ball back again. He's given it away again. He's got a third chance to impress. And he has, because he's been brought down in the box. We've got another penalty, and Clem is back in the side, so should be taking it. He's not missed one so far this season, but now he has. And I just feel like whenever you get close to sealing a title in Football Manager, the game likes to make you sweat. We're 1-0 down to a relegated threatened side. We get a penalty and we miss it, of course. And now Kunstel has got some making up to do. He feeds Zidane and the move peters out. We've gone attacking. 15 minutes to go. We've switched to a 4-3-3. And I think we could be out of luck in this game. That penalty was the ideal opportunity to try and score. We've pushed it up to an attacking mentality. And the changes that I've made have done absolutely nothing. In fact, we were creating far more when I left the wide players out on the pitch. I've changed it to a 4-3-3. I think it could be one of the worst decisions I've made. We've not lost since September. I bring you back for a game against a team towards the bottom of the table. And don't let the XG fool you. Much of that was because of the penalty. We've got poor performances all over the pitch. They've only had 2 shots in the entire game that were on target. And one of those was the goal. But wouldn't you just know it? We finally throw away a game. Our first defeat since September. And then so do the team in second place. They've gone down 2-1 to Alumini, meaning that with just 12 points left to play for, we've still got a 7-point lead at the top of the table. Join us for our next episode where we're going to learn our fate.